بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الحمد لله. بسم الله. اللهم افتح علينا حكمتك وانشر علينا رحمتك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. اللهم وفقنا توفيق الصالحين. وصلي اللهم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. والحمد لله رب العالمين. Did we get to we did the 7th, didn't we? We're on the 6th? Yeah. So inshallah, we'll finish today. Did we finish the 7th? So yeah, the 6th. Bismillah. إن لم يكون على عمر فاضل عند كل قائل فلا يحتقر أن يتحرى من الأقوال والأعمال ما قال أحد من العلماء الموثوق بدينهم إن في ذلك القول والعمل فضلا فقصار أمره أنه لا يكون أبدا أحط من مباح عند كل قائل. So this 6th maqam is that if you're not in something that's virtuous, then you'll be in something that's, if you're not in the most virtuous thing, you're in something that's less than this, and it differs from the other in that it can also be where the ulama differ about something, whether it's virtuous or not. So he says, if he's not in a virtuous action that everybody agrees on, فلا يحتقر أن يتحرى من الأقوال والأعمال ما قال أحد من العلماء الموثوق بدينهم. He doesn't diminish seeking out those words and those actions that some among the ulama who are trustworthy in their religion have said that it's virtuous to do. So the extent of his affair is that he's never in anything less than the mubah with everybody. So in other words, some of the things he's doing are going to be mubah, just permissible according to some ulama, and according to others they'll be virtuous. This is the 6th maqam. فقد قال مالك إن نظر المباح معصية لا يوفى به. For example, Imam Malik said that to make to make an oath about something that's permitted, you don't fulfill that oath. Nadar is only for things like, I swear I'm going to walk to Al-Quds. Because Quds is one of the places that's visited in our religion and recommended, you fulfill that oath. But for something that's not, that's simply permitted, like making an oath to visit somebody, then those things aren't fulfilled. And then he says, بخلاف ما اختلف في مشروعيته فقال إنه يلزم الوفاء به. And so there's others that say he has to fulfill it. ولا يجزي هدي ديك ولا هدي معيب. So some say you can't do a chicken. It has to be to expiate, you have to do more than a chicken. Or a ma'ib, something that has a defect in it. فإن فعل ذلك أو نظره لزمه المعيب ولم يزلمه الديك. So if he did that from his oath, then he would still have to do the one that's deficient, but not the chicken. مراعاة للخلاف, because there's a khilaf about the ma'ib where there's no khilaf about the chicken. So this is where he's doing something that somebody said. وسيأتي أيضا بسط هذا في هذا المقام في الترقي. He's going to go into more detail. He said, I will expand on this later, on this maqam when I get to the taraqi. Because remember, the tadalli is showing you the ladder. Taraqi is showing you how to climb the ladder. So he goes down from the top because he's at the top. So he's going down the ladder to show you the whole ladder of these 3 people that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has identified in the Quran as ظالم لنفسه مقتصد وسابق بالخيرات. people that oppress themselves, people that are in a good state but they're not outstrippers, and then the outstrippers, the people that are ahead of everybody else. And so he says, لا سيما إن جرى أمر بما هو مفضول عند المعارض فالمساعدة في ذلك من شيم الأئمة وترك المساعدة عند الصوفية قلة مروءة حسب ما يتقرر. So he says that if the action is in accordance with this thing that is less virtuous, then it's even more important to recognize it, even if there's people that say you shouldn't do it. And he says because to encourage those things is from the shim of the A'immah. It's the quality of the Imams, it's their character. And to leave that encouragement with the Sufis especially is not from muru'ah, it's not from just virtuous nature, the dignity of people. وانظر قول الإمام الفصل بين الشفع والوتر بالسلام هو الشأن. And look at the Imam, he means Malik radiallahu anhu, at going between shafa' and witr, because in Malik's madhab, after shafa' you do the taslima and then you do the witr. According to the Hanafis, you don't, you join the shafa' and witr. But Imam Malik said, قال اتبعه ولا تخالفه. Follow it. It was said to him, فإن صليت مع من لا يفصل. If you're praying with somebody that doesn't split, Imam Malik said, اتبعه ولا تخالفه. Follow him and don't go against his practice. ولو كنت صانعه لم أسلم بين الاثنتين والواحدة. And if I was doing it, Malik, I wouldn't say the taslima between the two. Because you could do it anyway, right? Because you're praying behind him. He still wouldn't do it. Qari ibn Rushd, Ibn Rushd, the great Andalusian faqih, said, يعني مالك أنه لو أوتر بالناس لعارض يعرضه بإمامهم الذي من شأن أن يوتر بثلاث لا يفصل بينهن لم يخالف فعله في ترك الفصل. So if he's praying behind somebody that does this, he wouldn't go against his practice. وفي المدونة قال مالك من صلى خلف من يرى أن السجود في النقص بعد السلام لا يشدد معه حتى يسلمه فإن الخلاف شر. Imam Malik said in the Mudawwana, if you pray behind somebody who thinks that the sujood is from deficiency is after the salam, because Malik differentiates. If it's ziyada, if it's a commission, right, then you do it after the salam. If it's an omission, then you do it before the salam. But he's saying if you pray behind somebody who doesn't see that, he says that you do it after the salam in both cases. Then he says, لا يشدد معه حتى يسلم فإن الخلاف شر. So he shouldn't do the sajda until he makes the salam, even though it's against his madhab. And then Malik said, فإن الخلاف شر, because this type of khilaf is shar. The ikhtilaf is khayr, but the khilaf is shar. And they differentiate between ikhtilaf and khilaf. The ikhtilaf is in the mas'ala, so there's a difference of opinion. But the khilaf is when you're unwilling to forego your position in a situation where it would be better for you to forego it. And then he says, انظر يسارة هذه المخالفة. Look at the this is not a major thing. إذ لو لم يسلم ما شعر به أحد. So if you didn't do the salam, nobody would notice it from you. So he's saying, look at what he's saying. Even in this, don't go against him. فقد قال فعل في صلاة المطلوب فمن باب أولى المساعدة فيما هو في غير صلب الصلاة. So what he did in his prayer was encouraged, and even more important is to encourage things other than, for instance, what is at the heart of the prayer. مما ليس من باب الحلال والحرام, because this relates to the halal and haram, what's permissible and not permissible. So he's saying in things that don't relate to that, it's even more important to encourage these things. ذكر أبو عمرو في استذكاره عن ابن هشام أنه كان يرشح رفع اليدين عند الركوع وعند الرفع منه، وذلك رواية أشهب وغيره عن مالك قال ولم يروي واحد مثل قول ابن القاسم فقال له ألا ترفع فنقتدي بك فقال مخالفة الجماعة فيما أبيح لنا ليس من شيم الأئمة. It's an amazing statement. Ibn Abd al-Barr, one of the greatest ulama in the history of Islam, he preferred to raise the hands in the prayer, because the Malikis, they don't raise the hands when you go up and down. They don't raise the hands. So when you come out of ruku', some of the Imam Shafi'i raises the hands, right? Imam Malik, no. Ibn Abd al-Barr, because the hadith on raising the hands is mutawatir, it's a very strong hadith. So Ibn Abd al-Barr felt that it was actually, the delia was so strong because so many of the Sahaba related it. But he says, so his companions knew that he preferred that position. So they said, why don't you just raise your hands and we'll follow you? He said, مخالفة الجماعة فيما أبيح لنا ليس من شيم الأئمة. To go against the group in those things that are really, they're not major things. This is at most it would be mandub to do it, but it's from the hayat of salah. It's not, if you leave things like that in the prayer, you don't do sajda for them. So he's saying, I'd rather be with the group than khalif tu'raf, go against the group and get noticed as, oh, why is he doing that? And then it creates confusion. So that, why is he doing that? And then he says, well, the dalil's stronger. And then the people get confused about their imam. ومن حكم الشيخ الإمام شيخ العارفين القرشي المروءة موافقة الإخوان فيما لم يحجر عليك العلم. It is from manliness or virtue, or virtue in Latin comes from the same root of manliness, but it really means, muru'ah is from, it's related to that, but it really means it's at the essence of human dignity. The muru'ah is really your dignity. Imam Shafi'i said that if I thought that drinking a glass of water would diminish my muru'ah, I would leave drinking water. And that's how concerned they were. And now we're living in an age of frivolity, and everybody's very lackadaisical, and there's no real adab anymore. I mean, this is just, people have to accept these things. But there was a time when people had immense adab for elders. If somebody was older than them, if somebody had gray hairs, they were just treated with so much respect just because they were old. And so he says that it's from muru'ah to agree with the brothers as long as knowledge doesn't prohibit that. If there's nothing in knowledge, just go along. They say shart al-murafaqa and muwafaqa. The condition of spending time with people is just to agree with them. Which means, obviously not in sinfulness, but just why create contradictions and conversations that end up in arguments that have no real meaning or relevance? Some people love to do that. They love to argue. وسيأتي قول أبي عمر من شأن العالم أن يذهب مع الناس في السعة والرخصة ما لم يخاف المأثم. And also from Abu Umar, he says, it's of the nature of the scholar that he makes things easy for people and gives them licenses as long as he's not afraid of some sinfulness. وَكُلُّ مَا تُرْضِي بِهِ جَلِيسَكَ مِمَّا لَا إِثْمَ فِيهِ فَلَا تَبْخَلْ بِهِ. Everything that will make the one you're sitting with, your companion, that will please him, as long as there's no sinfulness in it, don't stint him in that or her. Don't be a miser. Don't stint them that thing that's going to make them happy. One of the things that in Arabia they talk about tatyib al-khatar. Just making somebody, like if you upset somebody, to do something to yutayyib khatiruhu, to settle his thoughts. If he's disturbed, if you did something, it's to make pure his thoughts about you. So it's something you might say or do just to change that effect. And so now so he says, وكل ما ترضي به جريسك مما لا إثم فيه فلا تبخل به لعل أن تعطاب بذلك ثواب المحسنين. Maybe you'll get in place of that what you did, the reward of the muhsinin, because it's a type of ihsan to do that. And then he says, والله سبحانه وتعالى يقول ما على المحسنين من سبيل. There's no blame on the muhsinin. In other words, what you do out of ihsan, there's no blame. You can't fault them for it. If they did it out of ihsan, don't fault them for it. قال الشيخ أبو إسحاق الشاطبي الأولى عندي في كل نازلة يكون لعلماء المذهب فيها قولان فيعمل الناس على موافقة أحدهما وإن كان مرجوحا في النظر أن لا يعرض لهم وأن يجروا على أنهم قلدوه في الزمان الأول وجرى به العمل فإنهم إن حملوا على غير ذلك كان في ذلك التشويش للعامة وفتح لأبواب الخصام وربما يخالفني في ذلك غيري وذلك لا يصدني عن القول به ولي فيه أسوة. انتهى. So Sheikh Abu Ishaq al-Shatibi says that it's more appropriate, as far as I'm concerned, in every nazila. A nazila is some situation where you need a legal ruling. That the ulama, when you have two opinions, and most people do one of them, even if it's marjuah, if it's not really the stronger opinion, it's weaker, but this is what they're doing. Don't expose them, don't go against them, and consider it to be that they're following something from the Imam's first period, because the Imams differed in their opinion over time. Imam Malik lived 90 years. Some of his earlier opinions he discarded later on. The same with Shafi'i. Shafi'i had a madhab. When he went to Iraq, he had a madhab. When he went to Egypt, he had a madhab. So you'll find different opinions. So he's saying, just consider an earlier opinion and leave them on it. Because if you try to force them to go on a stronger opinion, you're going to create tashwish lil-amma. You're going to yushawish alayhim. You're going to confuse them. You're going to create turmoil in them. And you will open the door of argumentation, right? The Prophet ﷺ said, أنا زعيم ببيت في ربط الجنة لمن ترك المراء ولو كان محقا. I will guarantee you a house in the best part of paradise for the one who will give up argumentation even when he's right. And Imam Malik did not argue. If people started arguing about fiqh, he would literally get up, shake his shawl and say, Antum harb, your war, and he would walk away. He didn't argue. One man came to Malik radiallahu anhu and he said, Jadilni, let's have a debate. And he was from what's called the Murja'iyya. They were one of the sects at that time that had a position about Muawiyah and Ali. Anyway, Imam Malik said, وَإِنْ غَلَبْتَنِي, no, he said, وَإِنْ غَلَبْتُكَ, and if I win the debate, he said, أَتْبَعُكَ, I'll follow you. He said, وَإِنْ غَلَبْتَنِي, and if you win the debate, he said, you follow me. He said, وَإِذَا جَاءَ ثَالِثٌ وَغَلَبَنَا, what about if a third comes and he beats both of us? He said, نَتْبَعُهُ, then we follow him. He said, you're going to be on a new religion every day. See you later. In other words, what I have, I feel certain about. I don't need to debate these things. He's in a lineage of tradition. He took this from a rightly guided group of scholars. He gave it to a rightly guided group of scholars. They transmit it to a rightly guided school. يَحْمِلُ هَذَا الْعِلْمِ مِنْ كُلِّ قَرْنٍ عُدُولُهُ. They will carry this knowledge in every generation, upright people. In other words, we don't need to rediscover Islam in every generation. Islam has already been discovered. It's already been discovered. You don't need to rediscover it because you discover some new thing or a new hadith that you didn't know about. They've already been through all of the hadiths. They've already done it all. It's been done. We don't need to have those arguments and debates anymore. But you have to find people in that tradition, in this line of scholars, and they differ. Undeniably, the scholars differ, but his point is the great ones were like Shatibi. If it's a difference of opinion, if the people are doing something, even if it's less preferred, you should do that, just because you don't want to confuse people. This religion is not about confusion, it's about guidance. But people say, A'udhu billah ya akhi, you're leaving a dalil for a weaker dalil? No. I'm maintaining the unity of the Muslims, which is stronger than following that sunnah that you're saying is a stronger dalil. The Prophet this is what he would do in this situation to preserve the unity. This is the ijtihad. So he says that maybe others will differ with me about this, Ash-Shatibi, but that doesn't prevent me from saying it. And I have good examples for this, right? The great scholars before him. أما سيدي ابن السراج رحمه الله كان لا يرضى هذا المأخذ في الحلال والحرام. But Ibn Siraj, another one of the great ulama, he said he was not content with this if it dealt with halal and haram. He said for the sunnah and for the jaizat, mandubat and things like that, that's fine. But if it was halal and haram, يأخذ به في فضائل الشريعة عكس الشاطبي. He said, take it in the fadail, in the virtuous things. وقد وقع لي حكاية ذكرته في الأصل الذي خرجت منه هذا. ولم يزل الشيخ رحمه الله يقول ما زلت تصعب علي الفتية فيما يكون النص بحكم والأمر جار بخلافه ويمثل لنا ذلك بمن وهب موضع سكناه وعاد لسكناه بعد عام. النص أنه باطل والأمر بخلافه وكذلك إذا اختلعت الزوجة بنفقة الولد إلى سقوط ذلك عن الأب شرعا. فقول مالك وابن القاسم في المدونة وابن وهب وابن العبد الحكم ومطرف وأصبغ إنه لا يلزمها ما أناف على الحولين من نفقة الولد. قال المخزومي يلزمها ذلك. So he's going to show examples that really bothered him. For instance, if somebody gave as a gift his residence, but then he came back a year later and took it back. And the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that the one who takes back his gift is like a dog that laps up his vomit. So he said that the text says that it's invalid. But in Andalusia, they actually considered it acceptable. So he's saying that's a situation where I can't. Or a woman who pays to get divorced through the money of her child. And he gives other examples of that. So he's saying that these are things that he didn't feel comfortable with doing. فمن ذلك نص الشيخ الشيوخ ابن لب قال الشيخ ابن حسن ابن زرقون ورد الخبر بمسح الوجه باليدين عند انقضاء الدعاء. There's a hadith that the Prophet ﷺ wiped his hands over his face at the end of a dua. The Andalusians and the Malikis tended not to do that, and this was a khilaf. And so Ibn Lubbin said, أشار بهذا حديث الترمذي وكان إذا صلى الله عليه وسلم رفع يديه في الدعاء لم يحطهما حتى يمسح بهما وجهه. So that's a hadith in الترمذي, and it's a good hadith. And so وصححه الترمذي وحديث أبي درداء قال رسول الله سلوا الله ببطون أكفكم فإذا فرغتم فامسحوا بها وجوهكم. That's even stronger because there's a qawl in the hadith, if the Prophet ﷺ does something, then that's of less weight, according to the majority of scholars, than if he commands to do something. If he tells you to do it, it has even stronger weight. So he's saying these hadiths are strong. قال الإمام العارف بالله شمس الدين البلادي ومن آداب الدعاء كذا وكذا. From the adab, from the comportment or the courtesies of prayer or oration, that you should do this and this. And then he said, وَيَمْسَحُ وَجْهُ بِكَفَّيْهِ لِمَا رَوَاهُ أَبُو داود وَالْبَزَّارُ وَابْنُ حِبَّانُ وَابْنُ ماجة وَالْحَاكِمْ في المستدرك بأسانيد جيدة جدا بهذا النص. So he's saying, the great scholar Shamsuddin al-Biladi said, we should do this. وكذلك السيد مفتي تونس البرزري قال يؤيد مسح الوجه عقب الدعاء حديث الترمذي. And also the great mufti of Tunis al-Barzali. So he's showing that these great ulama said this. This was a big debate in Andalusia, like about putting the hands. So he's bringing it out because it was an issue in his time. It's not really an issue in our time. But the point is, we have other issues that are very similar to this. So you get the point. He's saying, look at what we're fighting over. These are not things that people should be fighting over. And so he goes on, there's quite a bit of that. And at the end he says, ذكر أن التقليد إنه هو في الأحكام ومسائل الآداب ليس من هذا. You know, that taqleed is in the ahkam. It's not in virtuous actions. If you have a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ tells you to do something that's from the fada'il, it's not taqleed. Like if you're reading a hadith or your teacher teaches you something that is virtuous, what he's saying is this isn't really taqleed because it's a hadith of the Prophet. So you have a hujjah for it. Now obviously you have to know if it's ma'mulun bihi or not. That's another matter. But that's his point. وَهَمَمْتُ أَنْ أَنْقُلَ كَلَامِ ابْنِ الْعَرَبِي فِي السِّرَاج. I wanted to relate the kalam of Ibn al-Arabi, what he said in the Siraj, and I wish we had that book, Siraj al-Muridin. ثُمَّ بَدَأ لِي فَأَنظُرْهُ عَنْدَ قَوْلِهِ. He's going to wait for later. وسيأتي في التكلم عن هذا المقام في الترقي مثل هذا عن ابن عرفة والبرزري والشيخ الشيوخ ابن لب. He goes on, all these shuyukh, سيدي المنتوري وأشياخهما سيدي القيجاطي سيدي الحفار يستخفون ما استثقله الشاطبي ويستثقلون ما استخفه الشاطبي. So some of them, they deem light what Imam Shatibi found heavy, and they deem heavy what Imam Shatibi found light. So this is a difference of opinion about these. وانظر أيضا مما جرى به عمل الدعاء أدبار الصلوات وزيارة قبر الميت صبيحة 7 أيام بعد دفنه. And look also at the action of making dua after the prayers, because this is an issue of our time. Some people are against this. You know, if they see somebody doing a prayer, the imam doing a dua, some people say it's a bid'ah. And there really are people. And the Prophet, as far as we know, he did not make dua after the prayer. And so the Malikis considered it makruh. The way the Moroccans got out of it was to have the mu'adhin do the dua instead of the imam. So, but the Hanafis, I think it's mandub, right? Yeah, so, and that's why you often find when the Hanafis lead the prayer, they tend to always do some kind of dua, the imam, at the end. So this is a khilaf issue between the imams, but he goes on to show that, you know, that this is action and there's nothing that says that they can't do it. And so he says, انظر أيضا ما جرى العمل دعاء أدبار الصلوات وزيارة قبر الميت صبيحة. So they also used to visit the dead person on the 7th day in Andalusia. This was a practice that the Andalusian Muslims did. So on the 7th day, like they have the 40th day, I think they do a khatam or something on the 40th day in Pakistan and places. So these are types of a'raf. They're norms that people do as practices. And so he says, قال الشيخ الشيوخ ابن لب لم يزل الدعاء أدبار الصلوات المفروضة معمولا به في جميع أقطار الأرض. This is something that people all over the world do. Like Ibn Lubbin is saying, this is something Muslims do everywhere. أو جلها من غير نكير إلا ما قد سلف. And people don't reject it, right? Except for, you know, what was previously mentioned. قدم غرناطة رجل سماه. So a man came to Granada and he was named. واشتد في إنكار ذلك. And he really was vociferous about his attacks on doing this dua after the prayer. وتابعه شرذمة ممن كان يقرأ عليه. And he was followed by a little group that used to read with him. He was a scholar, so he comes to town. This happens in our communities, right? You get this scholar that comes to town, a little group settles around him, and suddenly they're attacking all the things that they're doing in the masjid. Like what's Barat Sha'ban? What do they call that? Yeah. What is it? Yeah, Nus Sha'ban. In Pakistan, what do they call it? Shabi Barat, yeah. So you have the masjid and they're doing Shabi Barat, and then the new sheikh comes to town. He's got a little A'udhu Billah, bid'ah. Tell them they shouldn't do that. And then it becomes a fitna. The ulama differed on Nisfu Sha'ban. Imam Malik didn't act according to it. But Awza'i said it was something the Salaf كان يعظم الليلة in Sham. So this is an early Salafi act. So, and to say otherwise is to ignore a rich historical tradition of proof for these things. So this is where, if you don't want to do it, that's fine. But don't condemn others for doing it, who have their do this. So this little group comes to town. This little group joins this man who's come to town. وكان إذا فرغ مجلس كلامه بين يدي صلاة خرجوا مزدحمين فرارا من الصلاة خلف الأئمة. He would be teaching in the masjid, and when they finished their masjid, they would all flee out of the masjid so they didn't have to pray behind the imam who was going to do the dua at the end of the prayer. And then he said, وَإِن صَلَّى أَحَدُهُمَا خَلْفَهُم قَامَ بِنَفَسِ مَا يُسَلِّمُ الْإِمَامُ مُسْرِعًا مَذْعُورًا. And if one of them did pray behind the imam, with the same breath the imam is saying Salaam alaikum, he's leaving the masjid so he doesn't hear the dua. And then he says, كَالْخَائِذِ أَنْ يَمُصُّهُ الدُّعَى بِنَصَبٍ, as if he's afraid that the dua is going to cause some bodily harm to him. Or عَذَاب أو ينشب منه ظفر, or he gets like, he gets a sliver or something, or breaks a tooth. وأنكر الرجل مع ذلك أشياء مما درج الناس عليه في هذا القطر الأندلسي كتصبيح القبر 7 أيام بعد دفن الميت. And then he mentioned other things that people do in this Andalusian land, like the 7th day, going to the grave of the dead person. وكان أتبعه أشد إنكارا منه في ذلك, and his followers were even worse than him in condemning these things. Often the followers are worse than the actual sheikh in these things. حتى قال بعضهم لي وأنا راجع من تصبيح قبر إذ ذاك أتفعل هذا وهو كفر. This is Ibn Lubbin. I mean, you have to realize this man was considered like Sheikh al-Shuyukh in Andalusia. And he's coming back from the grave on the 7th day, and one of this guy's followers said, "You're doing this and it's kufr?" I mean, this is how far some of these people go to make takfir of people that do these things. فانظر تسفيه هذا وإنكارهم على الشيخ الشيوخ ابن لبن. Look at how these people deem these things like foolishness, and these shuyukh rejecting the teacher of teachers, Ibn Lubn. الذي نحن على فتاويه في الاعتقاد والحلال والحرام. We follow his fatwa in belief and in the halal and the haram. وعلى مذهبه في الأيمان اللازمة وغيرها من أحكام الدماء والأنكحة والطلاق فيما قصار أمره أنه مباح مع مأخذ مقلده. So he's saying, this is, we got our religion from this man, and look at how these people are treating him. And he said, والقائل في حلال أنه إذا جرى أمر بقول مرجوح في النظر أنه لا يعرض للناس في ذلك. So if something is marjuh, if they have a dalil but it's not as strong, but this is what the people are doing, then you're not supposed to confront them about these things. Just leave them in their actions. وانظر أيضا مما جرى به العمل ورشحه الفضلاء دون من شذ من جماعتهم تلقين الميت عند دفنه. The same thing about talqeen is when you put the body of the dead person into the grave. In the Shafi'i madhab, yulaqinuhu, and some of the Hanafis also say that, but I don't think it's not the general practice. Yeah, the Hanafis and Maliki share that. But talqeen is something that there's evidence for it. And Qadi Abu Bakr ibn al-Arabi said that it was a good thing, and it was the fi'l of Ahl al-Madinah وصالحين من الأخيار. وكذلك قراءة ياسين خرجه أبو داود وغيره ورشحه الأئمة وتأول ما ورد عن الإمام. Also reading Yasin for the dead, this is something that Abu Dawood relates a hadith in it, اقرأوا ياسين على موتاكم, and this is something that Imams have preferred, and they interpreted Imam Malik saying not to do it. Right? وقد كنت سئلت عن بعض فقهاء البادية يتورع عن القراءة على القبر ثم آل حاله إلى أن قام قارئ يقرأ على قبر انتهره بعنف ووكسه بيده وكنت قبل ذلك جاوبت بأن هذا ليس بمقامه ويجب أدبه لأنه سفه جميع الأئمة الذين يتأولوا اللفظ الوارد عن الإمام وأدخل على الناس شغبا في دينهم وحيرة في نفوسهم وسوء ظن في مفتيهم ما شذ منهم أحد فإنهم ما غضب منهم أحد هذا الغضب ولا احتسب هذه الحسبة ولكن على كل ساقة لاقطة رشحت لهذا المحتسب حسبته رشحت لهذا المحتسب حسبته وزاد في التبديع والطعن في الحديث والإنكار حتى كتب إلي إمام قرية دركل يذكر غيرته علي وما هو يجده في نفسه من التشنيع علي ورغب مني كأنه يستفهمني هل لي حجة أو كان ذلك مني زلة فكتبت إليه رسالة ألا يجد في نفسه من معترضا علي فإن عقيدتي بالنسبة لمعارضي ألا أزيده على السلام إلا سلاما امتثالا لأمر الله ثم أقول الحمد لله اقتداء بالحسن. So he says that I was asked by one of the fuqaha in the Badia who didn't think you should pray at the grave, to read Quran at the grave. And it got to such a point where somebody was reading the Quran at a grave, he condemned him violently and then actually hit him. And I had been asked before about that, and I said that he had no right to do that. And in fact, that he should be disciplined, like have some kind of punitive punishment, because he's basically attacking all of the great imams that didn't agree with what came from Imam Malik. They interpreted otherwise. And he's also created confusion in the religion of people and caused perplexity to affect their souls, and a bad opinion of the mufti that told them to do it. And nobody disagreed with this. And even the ones that did disagree, they never got angry like this, and nor did they do their amr bin ma'ruf like this. But every fallen thing finds another fallen thing. You know, for every fallen thing, there's somebody that finds it. And then he said, this man even started making more tabdi' and ta'an, like calling us mubtadi' and attacking us. And to the point where the imam of the village, he felt some ghaira for me, you know, like, because he's a scholar, so he felt bad about it. So he asked, you know, do you find something, do you have trouble in your soul, you know, it's really bothering me? As if he's asking me, do you have a hujjah for this? You know, do you have a proof? Or was that a mistake of mine? And so I wrote back to him a letter, and I said, I find nothing in myself about these people that do these things. Because how people that disagree with me, my view about them is salam and salama from the Quran. إِذَا خَاطَمَ الْجَاهِلُونَ قَالُوا سَلَامًا. Because he's on his dalil, he's a alim. He's a alim. So if somebody's attacking him, his view is salam and salam. You're just an ignorant person, and Allah says to ignorant people, say salam. Even if the person's learned, he's ignorant that he's not permitted to attack other people who have their dalils. وَكَانَ مِن مَعْنَا مَا أَخْبَرْتُ بِهِ مُدْرَكَ عِلْمِي. Because this is my knowledge. أَنْ قُلْتُ لَهُ إِيَّاكَ يَا وَلِيِّ فِي اللَّهِ ثُمَّ إِيَّاكَ أَنْ يَتَخَالَجَكَ رَيْبٌ أَوْ يَعْرِضَ لَكَ شَكٌّ أن الميت إذا وضع في قبره وتولى عنه أصحابه أنه لا يسمع خفق نعالهم فيأتيه ملكان يسألان. وكذلك الخبر الآخر الصحيح أيضا عن عمرو بن العاص قال إذا دفنتموني فأقيموا حول قبري قدر ما تنحر جزور ويقسم لحمها حتى أستأنس بكم وأنظروا بما أراجع به رسل ربي, which is in the Sahih. So this is in Sahih Muslim, Kitab al-Iman. He says, I said to him, woe unto you, Ya wali fillah, right? Because the mu'minun are awliya, ba'dahum, right? The believers are awliya of each other, we're allies of one another. So he's saying, Ya wali fillah, oh my ally with God. Right? He's calling him, oh, you're my ally, you're supposed to support me. He said, beware that you should have any doubts in your heart or deem in any way that the dead, once they're put in their grave and their companions leave after burying them, that they don't have any doubt that they hear the sound of their footprints. That's a hadith sahih that the Prophet said. They hear khafaq ni'al, the sound of their footprints as they leave the grave. And the angels come to ask them. And also the sahih hadith, khabar, from Amr bin al-As. He said, if you bury me, then stick around my grave as long as it takes to sacrifice a camel and to distribute the meat amongst you, so that I can aestheticness, like I can feel my companions, I'll feel the intimacy of my friends around my grave, and then I can think about how I'm going to answer the questions to the angels. This is Amr ibn Sahih Muslim. He said, stick around, sacrifice a camel, I'm in my grave, but I'm going to feel comfortable with all of you up there. Right? قال ابن العربي وعبد الحق على جلالة قدرهما والمفضلان عندي على من يعارضهما والنص لابن العربي يستحب إذا أدخل الميت قبره أن يلقن. Ibn al-Arabi, look at his exalted rank. And Ibn Arabi and Abd al-Haq are preferred, as far as I'm concerned, over those who attack them or who disagree with them. And the Nass is for Ibn al-Arabi, the great Qadi. It is recommended that when a man is put into his grave, that you give him talqeen. In other words, you recite to him the answers to the angels. If they say, man rabbuka qulillah, say Allah, Rabbi Allah, right? So give them talqeen. And then he said, Ibn al-Arabi said, وَهَذَا التَّلْقِينُ مُسْتَحَبْ. It's recommended. قَالَ هُوَ فِعْلُ أَهْلِ الْمَدِينَةِ وَالصَّالِحِينَ مِنَ الْأَخْيَارِ. And this is something the people of Medina used to do, and the righteous amongst the best of people. لِأَنَّهُ مُطَابِقٌ لِقَوْلِهِ تَعَالَى وَذَكِّرْ فَإِنَّ ذِكْرَ تَنْفَعَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. Because Allah said, remind the believers, because the believers are benefited by reminders. وَأَحْوَجُ مَا يَكُونَ الْعَبْدُ إِلَى التَّذْكِيرِ عند سؤال الملك. And no one is more needful of a reminder than when he's in his grave before the angels ask him questions. Because you have, in tests, you get anxiety, you forget the answers. You might know them, but you're so anxious that you forget them. وَلِتَعْلَمْ يَا وَلِيِّ فِي اللَّهِ أَنَّ الْمَيِّتْ فِي قَبْرِهِ كَالْغَرِيقِ يَنْتَظِرُ رَحْمَةُ اللَّهِ. And know, O my ally in God, that the dead in his grave is like a drowner waiting for the mercy of Allah, or some prayer, دعوة إذا لحقته كانت أحب إليه من الدنيا وما فيها. فإياك يا ولي في الله ثم إياك أن يدركك ريب أو يعتريك شك أن كتاب الله أوثق شافع وأغنى غناء واهبا متفضلا وما تستمطر رحمة الله أبدا بأرجى منه والرحمة إذا نزلت شملت وعمت. And so he says, know, O my ally in God, that the one in the grave is like a drowner waiting for the mercy of God, or waiting for some prayer that will save him. And this will be more beloved to him than the dunya and what's in it. And beware, O my ally in God. And then beware that you have any doubt enters your mind, that the book of Allah is the most secure intercessor. It's the most trustworthy intercessor. It is the wealthiest of wealth. And it is a giver of gifts, virtuous in its giving, and that you do not ask for rain and the mercy of God ever with anything more hopeful than the book of Allah. And rahmah, if it descends, everybody gets it. The good, the bad, the ugly, they all get it. حدثني الشيخ المنتوري قال حدثني الشيخ الشيوخ ابن لبن قال خطر لي خاطر خير والعاصي قد يخطر له خاطر خير فأردت أن أجعل على نفسي وظيفة من ذكر أو تلاوة وتردت في أي أفضل فأنشدت في النوم إذا الأحباب فاتهم التلاقي فما صلتهم بأنفع من كتابي. So Sheikh al-Minturi told him that Sheikh al-Shuyukh ibn Lub told him, one time I had a good thought, and then he said, and even disobedient people sometimes have good thoughts, like out of his humility. He's saying, even I could have a good thought. A khatir is like a gift from God, if it's a khatir khair. And he said, I wanted to give myself some kind of wazifa, some type of regular practice in dhikr or tilawa. And I was thinking, which is the best that I should do? Because he's in that highest maqam of doing the best. And so he said, I found myself saying in my dream, when lovers are not able to meet, the best thing they have to send is a book, a kitab, in other words, a letter. And so he said, I understood from that the book of Allah is the best thing, because it's the message from God. So if you're not with God, the next best thing is to read his letter that he sent to you. Like, because lovers, like, they'll read the same letter over and over again, right? I mean, now it's texting, and you could just keep texting, and so all these things have been lost on people. But it used to be, you know, a letter came, and it was a big thing. Now it's just emoticons, right? فَلَمَّا اسْتَيْقَظْتُ عَلِمْتُ أَنَّ قِرَاءَةَ القرآن أفضل. When I woke up, I realized recitation of the Quran was the best. وفي الصحيحين البخاري ومسلم والترمذي بين رجل يقرأ سورة الكهف إذ رأى دابته تركض فنظر فإذا مثل الغمامة أو السحابة فأتى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فذكر ذلك له فقال له النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم تلك السكينة أنزلت مع القرآن متفق عليه. And in Tirmidhi, a very strong hadith, a man was reciting Surah Al-Kahf, and then he saw his dabba, his camel or whatever he was riding, his horse, started to run away. And then he looked and he saw something like mist. And then he went to the Prophet and he told him that, and he said, this is the sakina, the shakina, this is the sakina descending with the recitation of Quran. So this is one of the sakina is a type of tajalli of the divine that enters in to the world. It's the quality of stillness. وفي الحديث الصحيح إن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال ما اجتمع قوم يتلون كتاب الله ويتدارسونه بينهم إلا نزلت عليهم السكينة وغشيتهم الرحمة وذكرهم الله في من عنده وزاد ابن حبيب وأظلتهم الملائكة بأجنحتها واستغفروا لهم. So in the sound hadith, a group will never gather in a house, gather to read. In one riwayah, in Sahih Muslim, it says a house in the house of Allah. In one, it says just gathering to read the Quran, the book of Allah, and to study it amongst themselves. يَتَدَارَسُونَهُ, to discuss it really amongst themselves. Except that sakina descends, this tranquility descends, and rahmah envelops them, mercy envelops them. And God makes mention of them in his gathering. And then he said, Ibn Habib included, and the angels enveloped them with their wings, put them in the shade of their wing, and asked forgiveness for them. ثُمَّ يَا وَلِيِّ فِي اللَّهِ. So he's talking to this man, this is a letter. السكينة إذا نزلت والملائكة إذا ظلت واستغفرت والرحمة إذا غشيت شملت وعمت. So when these things happen, everybody gets it. ويصدق هذا الحديث الصحيح الحديث الصحيح الآخر فيهم فلان عبد خطاء إنما مر فجلس معهم فيقول الجليل جلاله وله قد غفرت هم القوم لا يشقى بهم جليسهم. And then there's another hadith, and this is affirmed by another sound hadith, where they say to Allah, the angels, the sayyara, who go looking for the places where people gather for dhikr, like inshallah this is one of them, bi'idhnillah. They go and they're like lights. They look down on the earth and it's like they see stars, like we see stars in the sky. They see the dhikr. And that's why just like in this modern time, the stars are being put out from artificial lights. These lights on the earth are being put out from artificial lights. Instead of doing dhikr and doing these things, people are wasting their lives doing other things. So he says, there's a sinful servant amongst them. He simply passed by and sat with them. And the Exalted says, I've forgiven him also, because these are people that even the one sitting with them is not forsaken. فمن باب أولى يا ولي في الله إن شاء الله من كان الاجتماع من أجله والقراءة له. وقد ثبت في الصحيح عن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال: ما من مسلم يموت فيقوم على جنازته 40 رجلا لا يشركون بالله شيئا إلا شفعهم الله فيه. So the Prophet ﷺ said in the sound hadith about the blessing of gathering and reciting for somebody that no Muslim dies and 40 men will stand in funeral prayer for him that don't associate anything with Allah except Allah will make them intercessors for him. حدثني الشيخ المنتوري, his teacher, عن الأستاذ أبي عمر عن الأستاذ أبو الحسن القرطبي عن الراوية أبي عمر بن حوط الله عن القاضي أبي الخطاب عن أبي القاسم ابن بشكوال عن أبي محمد بن يربوع عن أبي محمد بن خزرج عن أبي محمد الخزرجي قال: أخبرني أبو عبد الله القروي في المسجد الجامع بقرطبة قال: كنت بمصر فأتاني نعي أبي فوجدت عليه وجدا شديدا فبلغ ذلك الشيخ أبو الطيب بن غلبون المقري فوجه بي فأتيته فجعل يصبرني ويذكرني ثواب الصبر على المصيبة والرزية ثم قال لي: ارجع إلى ما هو أعود عليك وعلى الميت من أفعال البر والخير مثل الصدقة وما شاكلها. وأمرني أن أقرأ عنه قل هو الله أحد 11 مرة في كل ليلة ثم قال لي: أحدثك في ذلك بحديث. So he gives this riwayah, and there's a blessing in mentioning their names, and he says that Sheikh al-Minturi heard this, that Abu Abdullah al-Qarawi was in the Masjid al-Jami' in Qurtuba, and he said, I had been in Egypt. So he's telling this story, the Sheikh. I had been in Egypt, and somebody came to let me know that my father had died. And I was emotionally grieved by this. He said he really found wajdan shadida. He became very distraught emotionally about this. And so his sheikh, somebody told Sheikh Abu Tayyib bin Ghalboon al-Muqri that he was very upset. So he told me to come. So I went to him, and he started telling me, be patient, and he was giving me reminders about the reward of patience when calamities afflict. And then he said, go back to what you were doing of good, and also that your father used to do, from righteousness, bir and khair, like charity and those type of things. And then he told me, and read for him Qul huwa Allahu ahad 10 times every night as something to give to your father. And then he said, أحدثك في ذلك بحديث. I'll tell you a story about that. قال كان رجل معروف بالخير والفضل فرأى في منامه كأنه في مقبرة مصر وكأن الناس قد نشروا في مقابرهم وكأنه مشى خلفهم ليسألهم عن الشيء الذي أوجب نهوضهم إلى الجهة التي توجهوا إليها فوجد رجلا على حفرته قد تخلف عن جماعتهم فسأله عن القوم إلى أين يريدون فقال إلى رحمة جاءتهم يقتسمونها فقال فهلا مضيت معهم قال إني قد قنعت بما يأتيني من ولدي أن أقاسمهم فيما يأتيهم من المسلمين فقلت له وما الذي يأتيك من ولدك قال يقرأ كل يوم قل هو الله أحد 11 مرة ويهدي إلي ثوابها فذكر الشيخ ابن غلبون أنه منذ سمع هذه الحكاية كان يقرأ عن والديه قل هو الله أحد كل يوم 10 مرات عن كل واحد منهما ولم يزل بهذه الحالة إلى أن مات أبو العباس الخياط فجعل يقرأ كل ليلة قل هو الله أحد 10 مرات ويهدي إليه ثوابها قال الشيخ ابن غلبون فمكثت على هذا مدة ثم عرض لي فتور قطعني عن ذلك فرأيت أبو العباس في النوم فقال لي يا أبا الطيب لما قطعت ذلك السكر الخالص الذي كنت توجه به إلينا فانتبهت من منامي فقلت السكر الخالص كلام الله وإنما كنت أوجه إليه ثواب قل هو الله أحد فجعلت أقرأها عنه. So he said that he was in Egypt. He had a dream and he was in Egypt and he saw people coming out of their graves and they were all going somewhere and he wanted to know what was causing them to do this. And there was one man that was in his grave and he wasn't going out with the group. And so he asked that man, where are they going? And he said, they're going to rahmah, mercy that's being distributed. And then I said, why don't you go with them? He said, I'm content with the mercy I'm getting from my child. And I don't need to go and fight over this other mercy. And uqasimuhum, like I try to get from theirs, from what comes from the Muslims. So I said to him, what comes from your child? And he said, he reads every day for me, Qul huwa Allahu ahad, 11 times. And yahdi ilayya thawaba, he gives me the reward. And Sheikh Ibn Khalboon said, since the time I heard that story, I used to recite from my parents, both of them, every day, 10 times Qul huwa Allahu ahad, on each one of them. And I continued to do this until Abu al-Abbas al-Khayyat died. And then I would recite every night for him and give him the reward of that. And then he said, and then over time I started getting tired and I stopped doing it. And then I saw Abu al-Abbas al-Khayyat in a dream. And he said to me, Abu Tayyib, why did you stop giving me that pure sugar that you used to give to me? And when I woke up, I realized that the pure sugar was the words of Allah, and that I was giving him the reward of that. And so I started reciting it again. Ibn Rushdin in his fatwas said, إذا قرأ الرجل ووهب ثواب قراءته لميت جاز ذلك وحصل للميت أجره وحصل له نفعه. He said, if a man recites and gives the reward of that recitation to a dead person, it's permissible for him to do that, and he'll get the dead person will get the reward, and he'll benefit from that also. And then he said, وانظر إذا كانت القراءة عند القبر فقد تقدم أن سبب نزول الرحمة هي أرجى للنفع. ولوجه آخر قاله العلماء من ديوان ابن يونس ما نصه أرواح المؤمنين خاصة تطلع قبورها ومواضع رميم أجسادها ذاهبة وراجعة تكريمة من الله، ولذلك أمر رسول الله بالتسليم على القبور وبزيارتها. نقر ابن يونس. So he said, look at, if you recite at the grave, and the ulama in the Diwan of Ibn Yunus, one of the great Maliki fuqaha, he said the spirits of the believers are able to ascend their graves, so they can actually come out of their graves. And Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah mentions this in Kitab al-Ruh also, that the awliya are able to, they have a type of mobility after they die that other people don't have. And they can come and go, and this is a gift that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives them. And for that reason, the Prophet said to give salam to the people of the graves, to visit them. This is what Ibn Yunus said. انظر تخصيص هذه الزيارة صبيحة 7 أيام بعد دفن الميت. So now he goes back to visiting on the 7th day. In Sharh al-Bukhari. So in al-Bukhari, Ibn Tawus said that they used to go on the 7th day, the Salaf, and visit the dead person. And Ibn Battal, one of the most important commentators of al-Bukhari, that is constantly quoted after him by Nawawi and Al-Aini and all the Ibn Hajar, they all quote him. So he says they used to do that. And he said, وَأَئِمَّةٌ تَحَقَّقَ صِدْقُهُمْ وَظَنُّنَا فِي مَأْخَذِهِمْ أَحْسَنْ مِنْ ظَنِّنَا فِي مَأْخَذِ غَيْرِهِمْ. These are imams that we believe them and trust them, and we would take from them before we take from others. So if they said we can do it, then we're going to do it. ولما تكلم أبو عمر في شرح موطأ على قول حين خرج إلى القبور قال السلام عليكم حين قدم من سفر فقام على باب عائشة فقال السلام عليك يا رسول الله السلام عليك يا أبا بكر السلام عليك يا أبتي. Aisha, if she came from a journey, she used to go to the Prophet ﷺ and she would say assalamu alaikum ya Rasulullah, and then she would say assalamu alaikum Abu Bakr, and then she would say assalamu alaikum ya abati. This is Ibn Umar used to say that. Ibn Umar used to say, he would go and visit the Prophet, and he would say salam to the Prophet, and then to Abu Bakr, and then to his father. وَقَالُوا كَانَ عَامَرْ إِذَا خَرَجَ إِلَى الْقُبُورِ يَقُولُ أَلَا تُسَلِّمُونَ فَيَرُدُّونَ عَلَيْكُمْ. He would say to people, don't you say salam, so they'll return your salam to you. And that's in the Tamheed. وقال أبو عمر هذا كثير جدا في الأخبار وذهب إليه أكثر أهل العلم واستدلوا عليه بقوله ما أنتم بأسمع منهم. The Prophet said, you don't hear better than they do, when he was talking to the people in the graves at Badr, when they were in the well. And he said, he mentions this many times in the Istithkar. وقال ابن عربي, Allah, that it's permissible to visit the graves. وقد ثبت أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم خرج بأمر ربي إلى أهل البقيع يستغفر لهم. And we know in the Sahih, in Muslim, the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم was told to go out and visit Baqi' and pray for them. And Ibn al-Arabi in his commentary, he said, had he wanted, he could have told him to stay in his house and pray for them. Why did he say go to the graveyard and pray for them? He said Allah wanted to make this a practice of the Muslims. And so the Prophet did it so that we could do it after him. كان محمد بن واسع يزور القبور يوم الجمعة. He used to visit, Muhammad bin Wasi' used to visit the graves every Jum'ah. And he would say that, they said, why don't you visit on Mondays? He said, because I heard that the dead are told about their visitors on Friday, that you're going to get these visitors. And on the day before and the day after, Imam Baji, the great Andalusian muhaddith, said, and faqih, إنما أمرت عائشة أن يمر عليها بجنازة سعد. When Sa'd ibn Mu'adh died, she said, bring his bier by me. Because I think it's Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas probably, Allahu a'lam. But she said, bring his bier beside me. أن يحضر لتدعو له بحضرتي. She wanted to see him. She could have made dua for him, but she said, when you go, take him to the graveyard, pass by me, because she wanted to see him. لأن مشاهدته تدعو إلى الإشفاق والاجتهاد له. Because in seeing him, it's going to make you even stronger in wanting to pray for them. ولذلك يسع إلى الجنائز. That's why we go to the janaiz, and it's not enough just to pray for them in our homes, but to actually witness the burial. ولم يذكر ابن عرفة في ديوانه الفقهي إلا استحباب القراءة على القبر لحديث الجريدتين. And Ibn Arafah also said that it was mandub to recite at the grave based on the hadith of the Jaridatain, where the Prophet took these two people were being punished in their grave. Because he didn't guard himself from urine, and the other because he was neglectful in his wudu. And so the Prophet put two moist palm frods on the graves, and he said, لَعَلَ اللَّهُ يُخَفِّفُ عَنْهُمَا مَا لَمْ يَبِسَ. As long as these don't dry up, maybe Allah will be easy on them in their grave. And وقد ورد الأثر عن عبد الله بن عمر أوصى عند موته أن يقرأ من سورة البقرة عند دفنه. And Ibn Umar asked for Surah Al-Baqarah to be read when he was buried. It's in the Sunan of Bayhaqi. People are neglectful of these things, but they're in the tradition. People think that the Muslims just invented these things. These modern Muslims, they think Muslims just invented these things. They had proofs for them. These are fada'il a'mal. They're extra things. And that's why they didn't make a big deal. Maybe it was weak, but they saw, it's a good thing. And then he says that about the hadith, اقرأوا ياسين عند موتاكم هو خبر مشهور خرجه غير واحد من الأئمة. This is famous. Abu Dawud relates it. And he said, وما ذكر فيه مغمزة. And those who challenge this or attack it, he said this is something that it should arouse in us some kind of, what's up with that? Like, why are they condemning that? واستحباب قراءتي عند العلماء مأثور. Everybody knows that the ulama consider it a good thing. عبد الحق يحتمل هذه القراءة أن تكون عند الميت في حال موته ويحتمل أن تكون عند قبره. It's conceivable that you do it when he dies, and it's conceivable that you do it at his gravesite. And Imam Laqami mentioned that it was encouraged to do that, and Ibn Rushd, Ibn Yunus, and others also encouraged these things. And he goes on that this is the madhab of the Imams. Look at what Imam Shihabuddin al-Qarafi said. لا خلاف أن بركة القرآن تصل للميت. There's no doubt, there's no difference of opinion that the blessing of Quran will reach the dead. كما ثبت أنه يحصل له بركة الرجل الصالح يدفن بجنبه. Also, being buried next to a righteous person is beneficial to you. ويبقى النظر في ثواب القراءة. But as for the reward of the qira'ah, in other words, the blessing is there. There's no doubt. Because anybody who says the Quran doesn't have barakah, it's kufr. But does the reward get to him? He said that's where the difference of opinion is. وقال الذي ينبغي أن لا تهمل هذه المسألة فلعل الحق هو الوصول إلى الموتى إن هذه أمور مغيبة عنا وليس الخلاف فيها في حكم شرعيا. He said that it's important to remember this should not be set aside, that it's likely that the reward will reach the dead because these are unseen matters, and this is not a khilaf about a hukm shar'i. This is not a khilaf about a legal ruling. هو في أمر واقع هل هو كذلك أو لا. It's just about is it this or is it that? Does he get the reward or doesn't he? That's the debate. قال وكذلك التهليل الذي عادة الناس يعملونه اليوم, and also saying لا إله إلا الله that many people do now when there's a funeral, they all say لا إله إلا الله. وينبغي أن يعمل ويعتمد في ذلك على فضل الله تعالى. We should do these things and trust in the bounty of Allah that He's merciful. ويلتمس فضل الله تعالى بكل سبب ممكن. The grace of God should be sought in every possible thing. ومن الله الجود والإحسان وهذا هو اللائق بالعبد. فقد تحصل مما قرأته أن شتان بين من هو على أمر تحمل عهدته موثوق بعلمه ودينه أنه مشروع وبين من هو على مباح لا قائل إنه مشروع ولكن قد يصير المباح مكرمة أو مكرمة بنسبة كقول مالك. So he said, in the end, look, what a big difference is the one who acts upon something, does an action, the responsibility of which trustworthy scholars have taken it upon themselves that it's a good action to do. So you're following trustworthy scholars that it's mashru', that it's permissible to do that, and between the one who's just doing some permissible thing that nobody said anything about. And then he says, and sometimes permissible things can become noble deeds. Look at what Malik said. لو علمت أن قلبي يصلح بالجلوس على كناسة لجلست عليها. Imam Malik in Tartib, and this is a riwayah that Qadi Iyad relates. Imam Malik said, if I thought my heart would be rectified by sitting on a garbage heap, I would do it. وَنَحْنُ نَعْلَمُ أَنَّهُ لَيْسَ لِلشَّرْعِ مَقْصَدٌ فِي ذَلِكَ. We know our Sharia doesn't have any purpose about sitting on a garbage heap. There's no end in our Sharia about sitting on a garbage heap. But if it was to rectify the heart, that's done by the niyyah. So it changes the action. This is Malamatiyya used to do these things. Some of them would literally sit on garbage heaps. There was a famous minister in Fas, Sidi Ali al-Jamal. He was literally a minister. He's filled with arrogance. And he had a massive conversion experience. He went to one of the sheikhs and he forced him to sit. This was somebody who was known for his arrogance and he'd mistreated a lot of people. He forced him to sit outside of Fez. There was a garbage heap and he had to sit on the garbage heap and beg. And it broke his nafs. And his student, became one of the greatest awliya of the later period in Morocco, and came from him multitudes of rightly guided people. So I'm not telling you they do that, but in Mauritania, when they finished memorizing the Quran, they used to have the students go and beg from wealthy families just to humble them, because I finished the Quran, they'd feel really proud. They would make them go beg in a bowl to humiliate themselves. وهذا مقام دون المقام الذي هو مختلف في مشروعيته فاعدد هذا المقام أنه المقام الخامس. So this is the sixth maqam, that you're doing good things even if there's difference of opinion about them, right? So the ulama differed about them, but you're doing good things. The fifth maqam, and these are shorter, but I want to get through them. I really want to finish today, so it's not much more time. هو من حيث الفتوى المفتي مباح. As far as the mufti gives the fatwa, it's permissible. ولكنه يصير مكرمة أو مكرمة بالنية. So these are about permissible things that become noble deeds based on your intention. This is the fifth maqam. You're doing permissible things, but because you have a good intention, they become good deeds. So for instance, he says, من حضرت له نية في مباح ولم تحضر في فضيلة فالمباح أولى. If you have an intention about a permitted thing and you don't have one about a virtue, then the permitted thing is better for you. So the example of that is that you have a niyyah about eating and drinking and sleeping. ليريح نفسه ويتقوى على العبادة. He wants to sleep so he'll be stronger, give his soul some rest so he can be stronger in his ibadah in the future. And وليس تنبعث نفسه في الحال للصوم والصلاة والنوم فالنوم والأكل هو الأفضل له. And he doesn't feel like praying or fasting at the time, he feels like sleeping. Then sleep and eating is better for him in that situation. Because his intention is to do it in order to want to pray and fast and do these things. وعندي أن هذا هو دون هذا المقام الذي قصرت الكلام عليه. This is less than the maqam that I didn't talk a lot about. إنما عنيت بهذا المقام أن يتحرم من المباحات ما يكسبه رقة في قلبه. That he should seek out in this maqam those mubahat that will help him acquire a brittleness in his heart, like visiting places where righteous people are, or drinking from the qadah of the Prophet ﷺ, or preferring the people of Wad al-Aqiq. Imam Malik preferred them. كما حكى مالك عن نفسه وإدارة ابن عمر ناقته. Or Ibn Umar, when he took his camel and he moved around, they said, what are you doing? He said, I saw the Prophet do that. They said, there used to be a rock there. He said, I don't care. Yeah, I just saw the Prophet do that. I want to do it. What he did. So he said that فهذا كلها مقاصد لذاتها تنتظم في سلك المندوبات فما من مباح إلا يصير مكرمة بل مكرمات بسبب النية. There's no permissible thing except that it can be a noble deed or even more than one because of the intention that you have in doing it. والمعصية هي التي لا تنقلب أبدا مكرمة بسبب النية إلا أنهم استثنوا من هذا مصلحة شرعية لم تنال إلا بمفسدة دونها. And they considered no معصية can be a good thing unless it's in order to ward off a worse thing. وَعْدُدْ هذا من المقام بعد هذا. So now we're in the fourth maqam. أن يقصد بالأمور الخسيسة التوسل بها لمقاصد تضمحل خسة الوسيلة في جنب المقصد المتوسل إليه. وقد تقدم أن المعصية إذا كانت تدرأ معصية أعظم فإنها تفعل. So this is where you do something that's a low thing, but it's in order to achieve something that's higher because of your, what you're actually trying to get. And so he says, sometimes المعصية إذا كانت تدرأ معصية أعظم, something that is normally unacceptable, if it wards off something that's even worse, then it can be done. كالكذب بنسبة لنجاة معصوم الدم من القتل, like lying in order to save somebody who's going to be unjustly killed, أو من أخذ مال, or stealing his wealth. And the Sufiya بل غيرهم كإمامنا مالك بنسبة لصلاح القلب, and like what Imam Malik said about sitting on a garbage heap if it would rectify his heart. Ibn Abbad said, إذا جاز لمن غص باللقمة من طعام حلال أن يسيغها بجرعة من الخمر إذا لم يجد غيره, مع أن تحريمه مقطوع به ولا تفوته إلا حياة فانية, فلأن يجوز مثل هذا إذا تعين أولى إذ يفوته بذلك الحياة الباقية والقرب من الله. So Ibn Abbad said, if it's permissible for somebody who's choking on a morsel of food from halal food to help swallow it by drinking a gulp of wine, if he can't find anything else, even though everybody agrees that wine is haram, and what he'll lose is his fani life, this ephemeral life of the world. So how could you say it's not permissible to do something even more important, that because of it he could lose his eternal life? And then he says, أنا بمثل هذا ما يستدفع المريد من الدواخل على قلبي. And what's meant by this is those things that somebody on a path to God will use to ward off those things that enter into his heart. Because everybody should be working on their heart with both knowledge and action. As for knowledge, it's like what the Hikam of Ibn Ata'illah says. الناس يمدحونك بما يظنون فيك فكن أنت ذما لنفسك بما تعلمه منها. People praise you because what they think is good about you. You should blame yourself because of what you know about yourself. ومن جهل المريد أن يترك يقين ما عنده لما يظنه الناس. And from the ignorance of a seeker of God is that he will leave what he's certain in himself about for the opinions of others. أما العمل فبما يسقطه من قلوب الأغيار. Those things that, as for the amal, it's those things that will remove otherness from his heart. And المباحات بلا شره لقصد تقويته على طاعة عبادات. So doing permissible things without avidity or covetousness in order to strengthen oneself in obedience is a type of worship. In fact, it could be an obligation, like sleeping after staying awake for a long time, so you need a lot of rest. Or eating or drinking after being hungry or thirsty that's affected your health. وسيأتي بسط هذا, and I'll expand more on this. And Tajuddin said, ربما وردت عليك الأنوار فوجدت القلب محشوا بصور الآثار فارتحلت من حيث نزلت. Perhaps lights will descend upon you, but they will find your heart filled with images. And so they leave from where they came. Because your heart can't take them. The light needs a pure, polished heart to reflect. And then he said, فرق قلبك من الأغيار يملأه بالمعارف والأسرار. Empty your heart from otherness, and he will fill your heart with knowledge and secrets. ومن هذا هو السماع عند القائلين به. And from this is audition for those who say it's permissible. You know what we saw the other night, hearing poetry and things like that. And Abdul Ghani al-Nablusi, Imam al-Ghazali permitted it with instruments even, some of the great ulama. كان موضوعه زمن السلف لحظ الأنفس لطيب نغمات الغناء في أوقات السرور وشدد الفقهاء في إنكار هذا. In the early period, this was something that the egos were after because of the delights of listening to singing and in the times of happiness. And so the fuqaha were very opposed to this. فقال أسبغ لا يكون الغناء إلا في العرس للنساء خاصة. Asbagh, the great Maliki scholar, said that singing or music should only be in a wedding with women. There's a khilaf. Some said that the men could also have that, but generally it was for the women. Bidaffi or duffi wal kabar. Al kabar is the the two-sided drum. So the duff is like the one-sided, the tambourine type, and then tambur is the tambourine, but the duff, and then the kabar had two sides, so they hit on both sides. So he said having a duff and a kabar, hamalan, leave them to their own devices, whatever they want to do with it, they can do. Aw bi dhikrillah, or they can do dhikr like they do the igaun in Mauritania. They go to the wedding and they sing La ilaha illallah and other things. So they can sing poetry, doesn't have hamalan, doesn't have to be dhikr, or they can do dhikr, aw tasbihan, aw tahmidan, ala ma hada, on those things that are permissible to do. Aw bi rajin khafif, or reciting poetry, nothing with a munkar in it, something bad, or going on for too long of a time where it becomes neglectful. قال ابن رشد لا فرق في هذا بين الرجال والنساء. Ibn Rushd said, we don't differentiate between men and women in this. They both can do it. وقال ابن العربي قول أسبغ لا يكون إلا للنساء ويكره حضوره لذي الهيئة فاسد. Ibn al-Arabi says, as for Asbagh saying only women can do this, or that dhil hay'a, somebody who is a notable, can't do this, he said, we don't accept this. It's fasid. It's invalid. لأن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم حضر ضرب الدف. The Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم himself heard a drum being beat. ولا يصح أن يكون ذو الهيئة أعظم من النبي. Nobody is more notable than the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم. So this idea that a notable couldn't do that is false. قال عياض ومثل العرس أعياد المسلمين ما أفرحهم. And this goes not only for weddings, but also for gatherings of Muslims, for their Eids, for the times when they gather for happiness. And then he says, like when لقدوم غائب أو لولادة أو ختان, like when somebody's born, you can have the women get together and have these baby showers and things like that, which they should do after, not before. Because you never know what happens. It's not good to do that. It should be done after. Because it's just more depression for the person. They have all these things and something happened in the pregnancy. But if they do those things, and then he said, وَلِيحِفْظَ الصَّبِيَ الْقُرْآنِ, or they memorize the Quran, or because some virtuous person's there and they're happy. And then he said, إِذَا سَمِعَ سَامِعُ بِالنَّغَمَاتِ ذكر عتابا أو وصلا أو هجرا أو قربا أو بعدا أو تلهف على فائت أو تعطش إلى منتظر أو شوق إلى وارد أو طمع أو يأس أو وحشة أو استئناس أو وفاء بعهد أو نقض عهد أو خوف فراق أو فرح بوصال أو غير ذلك مما يشتمل عليه لفظ السماع فلا بد أن يوافق بعضها حال السامع في مطلبه. So when you're listening to the audition, they recite different things. So you're going to hear blame, you're going to hear meeting with or somebody who left, or nearness and farness, or a desire for something that's lost, or a thirst to see something you're waiting for, or a desire for somebody to come, or some covetousness, or yas, despair, or wahsha, loneliness, or isti'nas, intimacy, or wafa'an bi'ahad, or somebody who fulfills his oath, or somebody who breaks his oath, or afraid of being separated from somebody, or joy over reconnecting with somebody, and other things. So these are all the things that are going to be in the poetry. So he's saying something is going to affect the person, because everybody's in different states. And that's the purpose of sama' is to affect the heart. فَيَجْرِي ذَلِكَ مَجْرَ الْقَدَّاحِ الَّذِي يُوَرِّي زِنَادَ قَلْبِهِ. So the likeness of this is like a flint that strikes and ignites the heart. That's what sama' is supposed to do. فيكون له مجال رحب في تنزيل الألفاظ على أحواله فإن كان الغالب على السامع هوى محرما فيهيجه هذا السماع إلى السعي في الحرام. But if the person is not well and he's got haram desires, then the sama' can actually encourage him to do the haram and go to the haram. Or if he has permissible desires, it might encourage him to do that, or affect him in desiring something, or fearing losing something, or hoping to meet. All of these things can happen, but sama' is mubah. Whatever the sami', the one listening, happens to him is another thing, because those are his states. And then So there's two things. You can get لذة نفسه وتعلق بأوصاف ربه ولكن في هذا الحال نقص من جهة ما فيه من حظ نفسه. So you can get some pleasure from it, like people have pleasure from music, or you can get something that causes you to connect with the attributes of your Lord. And he said, but there's still deficiency in it because the nafs has a portion of it. So it's not like sama' was something that they were saying was a great thing. But if that's how people feel closer to God, it's helpful. قالوا في هذا من عرف ما يطلب هان عليه ما يبذل. And it's been said, whoever knows what they're searching for, it's insignificant, whatever they expend for it. So when you know what you want, you're willing to give up things for that goal. وقد تبين بهذا أن السماع قط ما هو مقصود لا عند الصوفية ولا عند الفقهاء. But it should be clear to you, sama' is not some end goal, neither with the Sufis or with the fuqaha. Then we ask, هل هو وسيلة? Is it a means? كثير من العلماء ينكرون أن يكون وسيلة لجد وجميع الصوفية وكثير من العلماء بأحكام الله يتحملون عهدة أنه وسيلة. Many of the ulama reject it, that it's a means to being serious in your religion. All of the Sufis and also many of the ulama of the ahkam of Allah, they bear responsibility for it as a means. قال القشيري في رسالته إن الرذباري كان أعلم الناس بالطريقة من أصحاب الجنيد. Imam al-Qushayri mentions in his risala that Rudhabari was one of the most learned people of the path of Imam Junaid's companions. وقال ليتنا تخلصنا من هذا السماع رأسا برأس. Would that we could get rid of this sama' without distinction. In other words, this type of sama' is good, this type's not. Just, would that we didn't do it at all. وقال ابن سبكي نعتقد أن طريق الجنيد وصحبه طريق مقوم والجنيد يقول السماع فتنة لمن طلبه. We believe that the path of Junaid and his companions is a sound, upright path. And Imam al-Junaid said, sama', this dhikr with singing and instruments, inshad, the type of things that a lot of people do. He said it's a fitna for people who seek it out. وَرَاحَةٌ لِمَنْ صَادَفَهُ. But it's a nice thing if you just happen upon it. It's not something you went looking for. وَحَرَّمُوا حُضُورُهُ عَلَى الْعَوَامِ. Some of them prohibited that common people should go. فإن السماع بالنغمات يتلذذ به الفاسق والسفيه. Because they can have a bad effect on the fasiq and the profligate and the foolish ones. والطفل والصغير الصغير and small children. ومن قصد التوسل به مع هؤلاء السامعين له بحظ نفس لا يخفى ما فيه. And those who are trying to get some portion of listening to it, it shouldn't be hidden that their nafs has a portion of that. فإن قصد مجرد السماع لا لمعنى آخر تبرأ منه العلماء. If he just wants to hear it as a musical thing, then the ulama have nothing to do with that. تبرأ, they're free of that because it's not. In other words, there's a khilaf, but in that there's no khilaf. All of the ulama are against that. إمام الطريق الجنيد لقوله طالب السماع مجردا هو من المفتونين. Seeking audition just on its own without any purpose from it, these are people that are in fitna. اللهم إن كان كما قال الجنيد إلا إن كان العم الغوغاء. So as for the غوغاء, and now we're going to get to the last maqams. 3 more. Now we're in the ظالم لنفسه. So they're very short, but very interesting. So he says, as for the riffraff, لا حسبة عليهم, don't do any hisbah with them, just leave them alone. وهذا هو المقام الثالث. مقام الغوغاء الذين ليست لهم همة في تحل ولا تخل حسب هؤلاء أن يقال لهم تحفظوا من الأوتار والمزامير وما عليكم فيه حسبة. As for the maqam of the rabble, those who have no himmah, they have no aspirations in either adorning themselves with virtue or getting rid of their vice. It's enough for these people just to say to them, watch out from those musical instruments you're listening to, even though we're not going to condemn you. In other words, don't lose your prayer. watch out. All this stuff, all this, all your games that you're playing, your little, what do they call them? Those video centers, PlayStations, and then you lose all your prayer, So he's saying, watch out. تَحَفَّظُوا مِنَ الْغَيْمِ station. That's what he's saying. Watch out. I'm not telling you don't do it, but watch out. You're wasting your life. يَكُونُ لَهُمْ بِهَذَا حِينَئِذٍ مَكْرَمًا عَلَى الْمُخَلِّطِينَ. These people are still, it's nobler what they're doing by wasting their time than those that are doing actual clearly sinful things. So this is the first maqam of the ظَالِمٌ لِنَفْسِهِ. He's wasting his time, but at least he's not backbiting or stealing or drinking alcohol, right? So, يكون لهم بهذا حينئذ مكرمة على المخلطين وبالجملة فالفتوى تقتضي جواز أن تتسبب العامة فيما لا نفع فيه ولا ضر. The fatwa here demands that these people should be allowed to do things that are of no harm and no benefit. Real harm. I mean, they're harmful, but not that serious, dangerous harm that puts them in a mortal sin. وإن كان هذا مأخذا خسيسا. This is a low thing. فالنفس المتوجه نحو أخص. And the person that's satisfied with this is even lower. إذا كان إن ترك واشتغل بما عليه فيه تبعه. If had he left this thing, he would be in something even worse. This is the criteria. So if he's going to be in something worse, it's better he's in this thing. فالرقص واللهو للغوغاء إذا لم يتركوا لأجله فرضا. Let them dance, let them have their entertainment. This is for them, the غوغاء, Lady Gaga, right? إذا لم يتركوا لأجله فرضا, right? She's actually not in this, but it's interesting she has that name Gaga, because that's also غوغاء. That's another word for these people, the Gaga. Lady Gaga. إذا لم يتركوا لأجله فرضا ولا حسبوه عبادة. As long as they don't think it's ibadah either. خير من أكل العرض. It's better than their backbiting. ثم من دون هذا المقام مقام آخر. Then the next one. مقام المخلط المبتلى بالمخالفة والعياذ بالله. This is the maqam of the مخلط. Because Allah says وآخرون اعترفوا بذنوبهم خلطوا عملا صالحا وآخر سيئا. These are people that admit their sins and they mix good deeds with bad deeds, right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions them and عسى الله أن يتوب, right, عليهم. So perhaps Allah will make tawbah on them. So وهذا المقام هو أخص مقام. ولكن ليس قد كالمسرف على نفسه. So the مخلط المبتلى is not the same as the musrif. That's the lowest. So you have these three maqams. The one who's khasis, but he's still in things that aren't really sinful per se, right? And he's doing his fard. So he's watching TV, but he stops in the middle of the football game, turns it off to pray, right? Got it? Yeah, that's this person. But the musrif ala nafsi, that's the lowest. وهذا المقام هو أخص مقام وقد تدليت من المقام الأعلى إلى هذا المقام أعني مقام المسرف على نفسي. So I've gone down from the highest مقام, now we're down to the مسرف على نفسي. فلنرجع بالترقي على هذه المقامات إلى المقام الذي بدأت به وبه إن شاء الله أختم ختم الله لي به وبمنه وفضله. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he says, قُلْ يَا عِبَادِيَ الَّذِينَ أَسْرَفُوا عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ لَا تَقْنَطُوا مِنْ رَحْمَةِ اللَّهِ. So Allah says to these people, these are the worst of the ظَالِمُونَ لِأَنفُسِهِمْ. Don't despair of the mercy of Allah. Don't despair. Right? So don't. Why? إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَغْفِرَ الذُّنُوبَ جَمِيعًا إِنَّهُ الْغَفُورُ الرَّحِيمُ. وَأَنِيبُوا إِلَىٰ رَبِّكُمْ وَأَسْلِمُوا لَهُ, and turn back to your Lord and submit to Him. So they're Muslims, but they're not in submission. They're usat, but they're Muslims. So Allah is saying, أَنِيبُوا إِلَىٰ رَبِّكُمْ وَأَسْلِمُوا لَهُ. come back to God and submit to Him. So, لا تقنطوا, right? Don't despair. And that's why all of these people are from this ummah. ثم أورثنا الكتاب الذين اصطفينا من عبادنا فمنهم ظالم لنفسه. These are the ظالم لنفسه. The first one, they waste their life in things of no benefit. The lower than them are those who mix good deeds with bad deeds, so they're doing ma'asiyah. And then even lower than them, al-musrifun. They've completely wasted their life. They don't even do the fard. So they say, La ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah. They don't pray. Their fast is neglected. All these things. They might not pay their zakat, but they're still Muslims. If you ask them, are you Muslim? They say, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, Ashhadu Muhammad Rasulullah, I'm a Muslim. They're still Muslim. But they're zalimun li nafsihi, and they're the lowest of the degrees. So these 9 degrees, they're at the bottom. Now, the ulama, they said that the real faqih is the one that doesn't cause people to despair of the mercy of Allah. La yu'yas an-nas min rahmatillah. The rahmah of Allah is wasi'ah, it's vast, but people have to also recognize that it's a dangerous position to be in those positions, and people shouldn't be content with them. So this is the tadalli. He showed you the ladder. The second half of the book is taraqi, how to climb the ladder. One of the things he says is, on this lowest group are people addicted to drugs and alcohol. He says, for instance, teach them a musical instrument, because you're getting them out of a haram that's mujma' alayh and into something that's mukhtalif fihi but has a similar type of effect on like alcohol or drugs. That's why they often go together, alcohol and drugs and music. And so he's saying it's better they're doing that than doing something. And that's how he goes. He's slowly. And he believes that the ikhtirafat are because of this rahmah of Allah. Because if you look at the Sahaba, they had tadarruj. They didn't all become awliya overnight. It took time. They were drinking in Mecca. Even Hamza radiallahu anhu was drinking in Medina in the first period. And he actually, he got drunk, and Ali had the 2 camels out to marry Fatima. And Sayyidina Hamza, he was drinking, and then somebody said something. He said, are you're just servants of my father. He started boasting about his ancestors. And then he took the swords and he cut the 2 humps of the camels, killed them. He was drunk. Hamza radiallahu anhu. So they didn't just come in like people expect Muslims, what's wrong with you? No, they go slow. And that's what he's saying is help people get better. Don't expect them to be at that 9th maqam. That's not where you start. That's where you end. You might be starting in that first one. Zalimun li nafsi musrifun ala nafsihi. Really in a bad shape. That might be where you start. Now some people can have a powerful conversion and just do 180. That happens. Undeniably, that happens. People have Malcolm had a conversion like that. He went from, they called him Satan in prison, and he went and became really, really completely straight as an arrow. That happens, but that's not the norm. And so help people get better. And another dangerous one is when you go to the extreme of trying to do too much. So you have to take your time. So this is the wisdom of our tradition, of our ulama. I hope, I didn't think I'd get through this, but I'm glad I did. So I hope it was beneficial. I really think if these things were applied in our community, that it would resolve a lot of these conflicts over religion. But I will say, conflicts over religion are not necessarily a bad thing also, because it's indicative of the fact that religion is still important in our community. There are many communities that could care less. Some Christians will often say, what are the Muslims going on about? They don't care. A lot of the Christians don't care about their religion anymore because the religion is just disappearing. They don't see these things. Whereas the early religious community of the Christians was very strong. They had huge debates about things. They had debate about wealth. One of the biggest debates in early Christianity was whether or not you could be a rich person and a Christian. That was a huge debate because they really thought that you should give all your money away and serve the poor and to be a true Christian. They debated about war because Christ clearly, in that, with the exception of the money changers, it's indicative that he's nonviolent. Although there are some verses in there, let he who hath no sword sell his garment to buy a sword. And then in the other, when the Romans are trying to take him, he says, Peter lifts his sword, I think. He says, he who lives by the sword shall die by the sword. So there's things in there, let the dead bury the dead. There's things in there that are very unusual and difficult to penetrate. He definitely was not with the revolutionaries. He wasn't with the zealots. There's no indication, even though he lived under Roman occupation, there's no indication that he was part of the zealots, because they were there. And when they tried to trick him, asking about the coin, what should we pay taxes? And he said, who's on the coin? And he said, the head of Caesar. He said, give unto Caesar that which is Caesar's, give unto God that which is God. It was if he said that, these are riwayat without isnad as far as we're concerned, if he said that. But it's a very clever answer to respond to. So the fact that Muslims still do debate about moon sighting is, it's sad that a lot of these debates are a result of not understanding this type of fiqh, but at the same time, it should encourage us that there are many Muslims that still take their religion very seriously and want to do the right thing and are trying to find the right answer. And then there's others that have sickness in their heart. They just love fitna, and we have a lot of fitna causers in our community. We should try to avoid those. Are there any questions, or is time up? Time's up, yeah. So we should pray, inshallah. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. So I did the tadalli. You saw the ladder. You can think about where you are on that ladder. Assalamu alaikum.